Over the next 2 videos, we're going to build this modal that you see here. We're going to get it showing up now, UI time, challenge time, right? And I know a lot of my challenges have just been UI related, but I thought this one was going to be interesting because if you look at this modal screen, I think it can be built in a lot of different ways. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how many different ways you all can come up with and compare and contrast, because this one is actually an interesting little piece of UI. So go ahead, pause the video here if you want to do the challenge. I have a screenshot showing it. And if you want to take the challenge a little bit further than just building the UI, try to get it showing up with the animation that you see here. And I'll give you a little hint. The transparent background is fading in as the modal is sliding in from the left. And you'll notice when it slides out from the right, it also fades away. Okay, there's your challenge. If you want to do it, go for it. If not, we're going to do it together right now. Okay, so let's pull up the design and I'll break down how I built this. But again, I will say there's probably a bunch of different ways to build this. So this is just how I chose to do it. So the first thing you see here is this gray box, right? So how I did that was a hard-coded, width and height VStack. And in that VStack, I have the name, the company name, and then the bio. However, on top of that VStack, I put a spacer to push it down. The reason I pushed it down was so I can make room for this circular image. Because overall, this is a Z stack, right? The base layer of the Z stack is the gray box V stack, but on top of that is the image with the circle. So I can put a shadow on it so it looks like it's floating up, and that way I can also have it like overlap the top of the V stack. And then the little circle X in the upper right of the V stack is an overlay on the V stack that is, top trailing alignment for the overlay. And you'll notice that is our X dismiss button that we created before. So we're just going to reuse that there. So to sum that up, the gray box, hard-coded width and height V stack. The V stack has the spacer up top, the words on the bottom, and then on top of that V stack in the Z stack is our image pushed up so that it kind of overlaps that top border of the V stack. So that is the general gist of it. Let's go ahead and build it. So back in Xcode, open up our views, go to screens, and here's what I'm going to do. So in location detail view, even though this is like a whole separate view we're going to create, the only place we're using it is in our location detail view. So I'm going to put that in that folder for organization purposes. If we were using this modal screen in other areas, of course, it wouldn't go in there. I'd probably put it in custom views, but because it is so tightly coupled with this location detail view, I am going to add it in there. So Command N, new Swift UI view, hit next. We're going to call this Profile Modal view, hit create. Cool, there we go. I'm gonna open up the preview so we can see this in action. Okay, there we are, hello world. So the first order of business, we'll create our Z stack because I know I'm gonna need that, right? I want that to be the base. We'll deal with the image later. So the base layer of our Z stack is the V stack, what I told you. And again, this is the hard-coded square box. So the first thing I wanna do is give it a frame with a hard-coded width and height. So the width is 300, height is 230. And again, I dialed that in. It took me a little bit to get the size I want, but that's basically what we have here. You can see the red outline. Well, I don't want to just see a red outline. Let's give it a foreground color of dot secondary system background. That's what we want there. And then I want to give it a dot corner radius of 16. So let's put some stuff in our V stack. The first thing is a text. We're just going to hard code it for now. We'll actually pass in the real profile data after we get the UI built. This is my process. I typically hard code the UI just to get it how I want it to look, and then I worry about plugging in the actual data. So we want that to be bold. Why is nothing showing up? Oh, there it is. Okay. Bold, and then dot title 2, and I see a mistake I made. We'll do font dot title 2. And then I'll fix it here in a second. You probably see it too. Like you can barely see my name. That's the foreground color of system secondary. I got to go back and fix that. But I want this to be line limit 1, right? I don't want the name to word wrap. And again, we want minimum scale factor 0.75. It's typically what I go with. So the name will shrink before it truncates. And the mistake I made was not foreground color, background, just background. And then that view is a color system secondary background. So that's what I messed up. I did foreground color instead of background. That's why I couldn't see it. And then that's why my words were that color. So, okay, small mistake, quick fix. So that is our name. Let's go ahead and copy this for our title. We will make some tweaks to it, right? We don't want it to be the exact same for the company name. So we actually want dot font weight to be semi-bold, dot semi-bold. So I wasn't getting the autocomplete there. Dot semi-bold, line limit 1, minimum scale factor of 75, and then foreground color. This is where the foreground color goes. Dot secondary, right? Because I do want that to be light gray. There you can see, except I don't want it to say Sean Allen. We'll have this say test company, right, that we're going to use here. Try again. There we go. Now you see test company. Okay, now the next thing is our bio. So again, I just copy and paste this. Anytime I have a lot of text like this, even if I change all the modifiers, I do that just to, I don't know, just to give me the structure. So I'll say this is my sample bio. Actually, you know what, before I type out the test here, we don't want font weight because this is just going to be body. We do want line limit to be 3 because I don't want somebody to write a paragraph, right? And we are limiting their characters to 100 characters. So I know line limit 3 is good. And then I don't want the foreground color to be secondary. Minimum scale factor 75. Don't worry about that because we are limiting the characters. Okay, so now that I did that, let me type this out. This is my sample bio. Let's keep typing to see how long. Okay, preview. You're supposed to be updating in real time. Come on, killing me. Hit try again. There we go. Let's keep typing to see how long we can make this. How does the padding look? Okay, I'm not getting auto update on my previews. This is blah, blah, blah. All right, so what you notice here, it is cramped up against test company, and it is a little cramped up against the left and right of my overall gray box, right? That's too cramped for my liking. So I want to add underline limit. I want to add padding to my bio text. So you see that will give me that spacing I have in between my first name and my test company, and it just makes it look nice. Okay, so that's my basic VStack with the gray background. You see we haven't quite pushed it down yet because I don't have my profile image up there. Let's put the profile image up there so then I can tweak the spacing that I want. So below my V stack, which I know this all this frame stuff, right? So this is the top layer of my Z stack. So here I want to do image, and this takes in a UI image, and we have our placeholder for now. Of course, I will replace that with the actual avatars. So we'll do placeholder image.avatar. And you can see not what we want. So we got to do our typical stuff, right? Dot resizable, cool, dot scaled to fill. We'll do dot frame. Again, I just dialed this in of 110, 110. I did want it to be big. I liked it there. Of course, now let's give it a clip shape because it's not a square. So clip shape, and that is a circle. That is the default. So there we go. Okay, so now let's give it that shadow. So a shadow is a simple modifier. I do want a little more control over my shadow, so I'm going to use this more robust modifier here. So the color, I do want to be dot black. However, I want to add some opacity to that black of 0.5. And then the radius is 4, and then x-axis 0, because I only want the shadow to go vertically lower. So I'll do y of 6. And you'll see that'll kind of put my shadow only along the bottom, right? It looks like the light source is coming from the top. It's not like just an overall shadow. Let me get rid of this red circle or square around it so you can see. So you can see my shadow is only on the bottom of the image, and that's the look I want. Okay, so now we need to just push the image up to be where I want it. And so we'll do that with an offset. Offset. And again, we're only worried about the y-axis. I don't want to offset it on the x-axis. So the y-axis is negative 120. And again, I dialed that in because I wanted the gray background border to be like going right through the middle of it. You know, you could do like 160, try again on the preview. If you wanted it like way up there, or we'll do like 140, which might fit how it looks now. Right, so that is kind of like most of the image above it. You know, this was just personal style preference. Maybe I just like symmetry or whatever. I wanted the gray line to go right through the middle of it. So that's how I landed on 120. So I try again, CC, bam, right through the center. So now that I need to push my text in my VStack down. And the way to do that in the VStack here is to add a spacer. But just a regular spacer won't give you exactly what you want. You can dial it in a little bit, right? That pushed it all the way to the bottom. We can see that's too far. It feels too cramped on the bottom. So I don't want to push it all the way down. So I can actually hard code a frame on the spacer with a height to basically give my spacer a very specific height if I want to do this. And this is how you can kind of dial in your UIs. So I believe I did 60. Yeah, that's what I did. So you can see it still has room on the bottom to breathe. There's room in between the image. This is what I landed on. Again, you can dial it in yourself. And I've gotten some comments on like, why don't you give us the exact design specs when we build these for the challenges? And I don't give those to you because one, I don't have them. Like I said in my design video at the very beginning, like I tweak these myself in code. I didn't go into my sketch file, make the perfect design, have all the dimensions and the spacing, and then build it. No, I did what you see here, just tweak the numbers in code till I got it to look how I wanted. And I think in Swift UI, that's what you're going to do more often than not. Because Swift UI is so easy to prototype and get a UI up there, you'll just get something up there and start dialing in the numbers. So doing these challenges without the specific dimensions and specifications, I think is good for you to help you get in the habit of like building a UI, kind of getting a feel for, like I knew when I was building this, like, okay, I need a spacer up there, frame probably 40, 50, 60. Like I knew roughly where it was. And that comes from practice on like building these UIs without specs. So, okay. So when you're doing these challenges, I understand it can be a little annoying not to have the exact specs and you may not get it exactly how I do, but that's kind of the point. Okay, so now that we have that basic setup, right, the only thing we're missing is that dismiss button in the upper right. So we're gonna do that with what's called an overlay on the V stack. So here on our V stack, I'm actually gonna do it below all these modifiers because you'll see it's a little bit messy of a modifier, you'll see. So I'm gonna do it down here. So we'll do overlay. You see it takes in an overlay, which for us will be a button here. And I like to do this for some spacing purposes. So we'll do button. And it's the typical multiple trailing closures on a button, label, and then the button action we'll come back to, but this is where we're going to basically dismiss the modal. We'll handle that in the next video when we get all this working. This video is just getting the UI up and running. So the label here, this is where we get to use some reusability here, X dismiss button, right? Remember we built that? And if I go back just to refresh your memory, well, there's the X dismiss button. Before I refresh your memory on that, let's do comma alignment. And this is a property on the overlay. So again, you do bottom, we'll do bottom leading just to show you. If I do bottom leading, look where my circle X goes over there. Of course, we don't want bottom leading. You know, you can do top leading if you like your stuff in the top left. That feels weird, right? They're always in the top right. So we'll do top trailing. And then as personal preference, I don't know. I don't like these like empty parentheses down there. I know some people do that. I like to put it there. Again, personal preference. And if you're going to do that, you could argue why not start the button up here? Because you have an opening, why not have a closing? Again, this is all just code structure, personal preference. I kind of like this just for cleanliness. Because like I said, this modifier can get a little bit messy, especially if you're actually like styling your button here. We're nice that we have one line. Speaking of that one line with the X dismiss button, let's command click into it just to refresh your memory. This is where we have our reusable circle X button. And if you remember, we are doing the touch target trick, where we make our image on the X mark like bigger, 44 by 44, right? You can see the red square on the preview. That is our whole touch target. You know how it is, right? It's annoying trying to tap these little buttons. So make the invisible touch target bigger, better user experience. So that's the little hack that we're doing there. So back to the profile mode view, let's do a quick little refresher because we're done with the UI. The overall structure is a Z stack, and that's because the bottom layer is our V stack that has the gray background, that has all of our text in it, because the top of the Z stack is our image, right? That we moved up a little bit to be cut in half by the gray background, essentially. That's what we moved up with the offset. And then to account for that, we added the spacer up top on our V stack with a hard-coded frame of 60, just to bump down our text a little bit to get this look and feel. And then of course we added the overlay with our X dismiss button with the top trailing. That put it up there. And then in the next video, we're actually going to add functionality to that button so it will trigger the animation to dismiss this view. So that's the UI for the profile modal. Again, feel free to talk about and post your solutions to the challenge in the comments or in the Slack channel where you can actually post images and all that stuff. Because again, you can build this UI probably a bunch of different ways. And I think the discussion on why you chose this way versus this way, or I think this is better and this is better, that kind of discussion I think will be very, very valuable.